When Doja posted on her Twitter mentioning the word scarlet, she's referring to the book The Scarlet Letter, in which the heroine Hester Prynne is charged with the crime of being an adulterer and sentenced to wear a red A on her chest to humiliate and shame her in front of the town, and they will know her for the sins that she's committed. The Scarlet Letter is a symbol in the book, and in wearing the letter, this brings about Hester's suffering and loneliness, and also provides her rejuvenation. Doja is now wearing the letter A as her own message to the world. Her use of the inverted letter A is her own way of showing what attention has done to her, and now what it's doing for her. She reached the point in her career where she didn't want to continue playing the part of the pretty, fairy pop star. This is the story of Carrie. Much like Hester from The Scarlet Letter, Carrie is a girl whose tragedy is based in humiliation and shame, and her revenge is fueled by rage. And it is in this moment when her transformation from innocent girl to destroyer of worlds is initiated, because blood is an important symbol that repeatedly appears in the film, and it starts with her first period. Carrie thought she was dying when she saw the blood, because her mother intentionally made her unaware about her own body. So in her desperation, Carrie runs to her classmates pleading for help, and what do? They humiliate and shame her for her ignorance, further traumatizing her. This is when we see the first experience of Carrie's powers. Her telekinesis is a reaction to the people around her. The people around her neglect her, abuse her, harm her, and severely mistreat her. And her power has been so demoralized by her mother that she doesn't even respond. She instead remains silent and accepts this mistreatment. But her silenced rage can no longer continue, and it manifests subconsciously through an uncommon phenomenon designed to give her the ability to express her rage through the power of her body, through overpowering her environment. Carrie's mom uses her extreme and fanatic interpretation of Christianity as a vehicle to self-justify abusing and oppressing her daughter. Her mother never taught her anything about what it means to become a woman.
Say it. The raven was called.
Tell me, Mama.
Say it.
Each instance that Carrie uses her powers, she's using them unconsciously. They are merely an externalization of her rage at being mistreated by the members of society, which further ostracizes and isolates her. And we as the viewer, we feel a deep pain for the abuse she's enduring at home with her disturbed mother. And in some sense, we see how Carrie is justified in how she stands up for herself, because at this point, she's still a victim. Blood is a symbol of the transformation of self, since it is related to death and birth through the process of sacrifice, labor, and pain. Carrie's power is housed in her body, so her body is actually a symbol for her transformation. It is the vessel through which her rage takes place and her telekinesis, as well as the process of her entering her womanhood. And this is what the fear of the feminine is. It is its ability to use her body as either the polarities of a force of destruction or a force of absolute creativity as the vessel for giving life. The climax of any story is the heroine's ability to overcome the obstacles presented to her through tapping into her body's unconscious feminine wisdom and processing it through feeling her feelings, or using her body's rage and swallowing the people around her. This scene here is an incredible representation of my point. The mother's dark side is being projected and cast into Carrie's consciousness and self-makeup, literally. How she sees herself. She looks into a fractured mirror, and mirrors are representations of one's reflection of self-concept. All Carrie wants is her mother's approval, love, and connection, and instead her mother shames her by saying this:
I can see your dirty pillows.
Breasts, Mama. They're called breasts. And every woman has them.
and acting like this.
Well, he's not coming.
He is coming, Mama. Now stop it. I'm nervous enough.
He's not gonna come.
Away! They're all gonna laugh at you!
Her mother's manic and self-harming behavior is an expression of how she feels about herself, and she expels this emotion onto her daughter instead of processing her own darkness. Carrie naturally internalizes her mother's own self-rejection and rage as her own. In one of the most climactic scenes in the horror genre, it is this moment when the pig's blood is being thrown onto Carrie and her dawning realization at what happened. She sees the world laughing at her, and her worst nightmare has come to life. She hears the taunting echoes of her mother.
We're all sorry, Cassie.
Trust me, Carrie.
And something in her snaps, and in one moment, she switches from victim to perpetrator. This moment of Carrie seeking revenge on everyone was actually initiated by her mother, makes her a victim of her abuse that she's endured since childhood. She was made a monster. Linda J. Holland Toll has stated that Carrie is about disaffirmation because society makes the human monster, cannot control the monster, yet still denies the possibility of actual monster existence while simultaneously defining humans as monsters. And after all the death and destruction that Carrie committed, all she wants is nurturance from her mother.
I love something more.
While she doesn't even comment on how she destroyed and committed such acts of violence. Instead, her mother confesses her sins to her and Carrie forgives her and accepts her mother.
After the first time, before we were married, Ralph promised never again.
And it is in this very moment the mother's revenge is enacted. But in reality, it's her mother's way of rejecting her own darkness by suffocating Carrie of life, the one who reminds her of her shame. Carrie ends her mother's life in a last attempt to protect herself from being swallowed by her mother's rage. She uses her own powers to destroy the source of all the pain in her life. And in a tragic end, Carrie is swallowed by the fire, whereas in the book, Carrie cries out for her mother as she dies. Carrie's true tragedy was her inability to separate herself from her mother, and understandably so, as the victim of her mother's abuse that she's endured for years without the aid of her telekinesis. Her inability to channel this power to become an enduring symbol of feminine creative transformation was the true tragedy. And so instead, through the symbolism of blood, she became a shadow of her mother literally and metaphorically. So yes, she was able to attain vengeance through her powers, but her rage ultimately consumed her and defeated her. Whereas Doja channels her rage in a way where she ultimately comes out victorious because she was honest with herself and her fans.
I used to like your music, but you treat your fans like somebody coming in here being like, you're ugly as when you're bald. That's my fan. Music and you like it. And if you don't, cool, great. I don't give a I'm not doing it so that you like me. I'm doing it because it's fun.
Blood also serves as a symbol for the sacrifice that Doja had to make for the old Doja.
I don't like having hair. I never liked having hair. I've never felt so fucking happy.
And you can see that in the tweet where people ask her, we want the old Doja back, and she says, be careful what you wish for. So really, it's a sacrifice of the old Doja and a rebirth of her new self. We all come into this world covered in blood through the sacrifice of our mothers, and their transformation marks our passage into this world. It's important to note that there is no rebirth without sacrifice, and that's on a metaphysical, spiritual, emotional, and physical level. So as a response to this public shaming, Doja has said in this tweet that she got the bag and she did it by using her foolish fans. Some of her fans have taken this the wrong way, but in actuality, she's simply stating that she had to make a personal sacrifice in order for her to be able to do what she wants to do, which is to reimagine who Doja Cat is. In some sense, she's enacting her revenge similar to Carrie, symbolically at least. And on a side note, it absolutely boggles my mind how when a woman decides to cover up, she's oppressed by men. And when a woman decides to reveal herself, she's oppressed by men. And you know what's interesting? This entire ideology is actually inherent to Freudian thinking. This is not to say that Freud didn't have some good ideas. Freud wildly claims that a woman's sexual anatomy and psychological state is measured by a man's, and he termed it penis envy. This idea is so profane and it's absolutely deplorable because it strips women of their spiritual essence as keepers of the unseen. That shouldn't be surprising coming from Freud because he harbored some misogynistic ways of thinking. In his true essence, he was a materialist that deprived himself of thinking open-mindedly because he refused to submit his ideas through a spiritual filter since he only thought the material world was of value. On the cover of the music video, the third time we see Doja covered in blood with the inverted A, and it's really a response to the public humiliation and response that people had to her shaving her head and doing things that are weird. And these are the incessant questions that many women are faced with, specifically women that are in the public eye. You shouldn't feel like that, you shouldn't dress like that, you shouldn't be like that, you shouldn't sit like that, you shouldn't walk like that.
We do not care.
And in this way, we lose many creative, intelligent, thought-provoked women to this regressive socialization. How is a woman supposed to grow in an environment that is constantly examining her? And how is she supposed to nourish herself if she feels the desire to take flight from her own physical existence? Doja has undergone a feminine rebirth of consciousness, and she's now in her creativity for the sake of creativity. While I'm doing that, I'm going to show you how much I don't care about what you have to say, and you're still going to give me attention for it. That's exactly what this whole music video is about. It's her statement to the world that she's going to do what she wants to do, regardless of how many people attempt to humiliate her for what she wants to do. The lyric when she says,
This one doesn't bite, it doesn't get aggressive.
we have to go back to Freud for a second because it's really important that these two are connected. He stated that complexes that appear in women are the result of, quote, an essential wish to be a man. According to Freud, the most upsetting occurrence in the development of the little girl is the discovery that other human beings have a penis while she has none. Quote, the discovery of her castration is the turning point in the life of the girl. And as boys mature, they experience what is known as castration anxiety, or the parallel realization that girls do not have a and perhaps they could face the same dismal fate. Contemporarily, castration anxiety is the mimicked fear that hypermasculine have with anything associated with the feminine. They fear emasculation so deeply that anything associated with the effeminate induces a state of anxiety in men. And that's where the myth of the vagina denata comes from. It means vagina with teeth. There's this really famous movie that I have yet to see, and so I won't be discussing the movie, but more so the myth. That's what Doja's saying when she says it doesn't bite. The myth of the vagina denata was actually popularized by Freud and is rooted in the fear of the feminine, because a man entrusts himself to a woman and is overpowered by his desire for her. And in order for him to experience pleasure, he must let go of control. And the fear is that he loses himself to the woman. He loses his power, because men associate power with their phallus. And there are obviously deeper, more emotional meanings to this, but we're gonna stick with the physical, particularly because this is what the music video is related to. This has a direct relationship to the devouring feminine archetype, particularly the archetype of the devouring mother, which stems from childhood experiences of a mother who suffocates her child from experiencing life. It's important to note that the vagina denata myth is something that Freud and Aristotle and others have spoken about, doesn't actually give any credence to the power of the female form. Aristotle's definition of a female is a mutilated male. Let that sink in. This repeated lyric
This one doesn't bite, it doesn't get aggressive.
is Doja's way of referencing her awareness of her power that's housed within her feminine form, and it's still very much intact.
I am not afraid to finally say with my chest.
And it manifests specifically with her inverting the A. It's actually the occult alchemical symbol of the unseen creative feminine force of the universe, manifested as the female anatomy and representing the feminine elements, water and earth. Doja is leaning into the subconscious fear that people have of the feminine.
Being so insecure and like being afraid of like a girl posting selfies with makeup and the makeup is red. Boo! It's a good conversation to have, but it's embarrassing. You know what I mean? For you, because you're stuck, you're in a hole.
By addressing it in elusive ways regarding nudity.
Look at me, look at me. I'm naked. Vulnerability earned me a lot of bacon.
Desire and rage.
I never gave a F. Go start a pot, bitch.
Our analysis so far is a partly unconscious, partly conscious, creative decision. The release of this song is her way of attaining her version of self-acceptance in the face of an unrelenting public eye.
Attention is not really a song. It's like more of like a piece. It's a message. It's not really supposed to be replayed.
She's telling people that she has no problem being perceived now that she has undergone her rebirth.
I think when I shaved my head, it just gave me this like sense of self that was different from any other time in my life, and just accepting myself for who I am no matter who can see me.
It feels like she's in another world because it gives the sense that she's not underwater, rather that it's a barrier made of water in which she looks warped and transformed. Water also symbolizes life itself, the renewal of life, and her movements indicate that she's in an enclosed space that isn't accessible to the public, and all they can do is give her attention, which is the lifeblood of any artist and any person, really. There are many women who resonate with Doja's expression regardless if they're into the look, because it's giving,
wouldn't you want to compromise?
Stupid.
People wish they could have that kind of courage to not compromise themselves in order to be accepted. That's where the fear comes from. This 5'5" woman got people shook because she decided to explore the varying degrees of human expression in the form of symbolism and wasn't willing to conform herself to fit into the expectations of others simply because they have fear. And you don't have to either. And as a side note, I didn't hear anyone saying anything when Doja released this music video versus when she appeared at the Met dressed as a cat. Clearly, this is all a performance. This is performance art. To tie this all together, both Doja Cat and Carrie are manifestations of the feminine, specifically the dark feminine. This is the symbolical mark that the feminine is not only one that gives life, but it's also the one that takes life away. And so this manifestation of death and destruction is actually fueled by a justifiable rage. Because at its core, it's about how our heroines, Hester Prynne, Doja Cat, and Carrie White, all used their rage and channeled it in a way that while some ended very tragically, others were able to tell their own stories in a way that liberated them.
How do you become her? Everyone and everything comes to me is a mindset, a natural way of being. It is activating magnetism through practice, ritual, knowledge, insight, and having a mind-shifting experience. This is the heroine den. Relaxing, releasing, receiving, and realizing that you house the power. A retelling, relaxing, releasing, and receiving. The heroine den is an ethereal space.
Her effortless power.
You are not in the way. You are the way. You are not part of reality. You are reality. Remember, you are the heroine of your story. Powerful, in control, abundant, spiritual, in tune, potent, effortless, hypnotic, timeless consciousness. You want the passcode? Join the waitlist. Receive the key, unlock the heroine den, and finally find what you've always been looking for. It's time to undergo your rebirth. Act 1. Rebirth. The countdown begins now.